Hello, and welcome to Wicked Wednesdays, your weekly podcast on sex and sexuality, with an emphasis on BDSM, kink, and polyamorous relationships. I'm your host, Wicked Fellow, and this week we're going to talk about hard domination versus soft domination. How do people play along that spectrum? Before we get started, I want to send a very special thank you to Stella and Dom. What's better than one Dom? Two Doms. I've always said that. Thank you very much for your support. I'm trying to work backwards and make sure that everyone that has pledged gets a call out. If you have not heard your name, reach out to me and I will definitely get you in an episode. I cannot thank you guys enough for your support, and you really are what makes the podcast work week after week, which I am trying very hard to do. It's 3 weeks in a row now. We're on a roll. So, to give you a bit of a break from our heavy conversations on the truth, which is a topic that we're not done with yet. I still have several episodes of things that I want to cover, both that are directly about the truth in a relationship, but also branch off of that. Trust, for example. We will be getting back to that, but since this is episode 69, which I'm told is a very nice number, I wanted to get back to something a bit more sexy, a bit more on topic as far as dominant and submissive relationships. I also have an episode planned on polyamory because I have neglected that as a topic. And there are a lot of kink BDSM podcasts. Some of them touch on polyamory because whether we like it or not, whether everybody likes it or not, that is seen as part of the kink community. I consider it part of the kink community in a way. It's more part of the marginalized outside of the norm relationship. You know, being poly isn't necessarily kinky. There are a lot of poly relationships that don't have anything kink related in them. But because it's a non-traditional style of relationship, it kind of gets shoehorned into kink. And so since this is a relationship podcast for people that are underrepresented in normal, cis hetero relationships, and because being poly is a big part of my lifestyle, I've always wanted to fold that into this podcast because how you deal with a polyamorous relationship is always quite a bit different than your standard monogamous relationship. And I was listening to a podcast today, specifically a kink podcast, and I'm not trying to call anybody out in any way, shape, or form. Everybody gets their own take. Everybody gets their own feelings. Everybody gets their, I'm not the arbiter of what's right and wrong in a relationship. So it's wrong for me to say they're wrong. They don't understand poly. They understand poly from their perspective. But it was clear that the hosts of the podcast, while they weren't anti-poly, they didn't really understand polyamory. Neither of them practiced polyamory. And unfortunately, their episode came off as very, kind of anti-poly or poly negative, I guess, which is a shame because something that I've tried very hard to do in this podcast is whether or not it's something that I practice myself. I've always tried to be very open and welcoming and honest about, I don't do this kind of play, but I'm fine with it. And if it makes you happy, you should do it. I would like all podcasters in this space to be very conscious about that, to really think about how they're talking about someone's particular lifestyle. Because the last thing we need are people within our community, and I'm using the broad spectrum of non-traditional relationships. The last thing we need is people inside the community bad-mouthing, even damning through faint praise is a good way of putting it, other styles of relationships. So yeah, they weren't anti-poly, but it was clear that they didn't really get it, and neither of them were into it, and that came across very strongly to me as a poly person. Listening to their podcast, it turned me off a little bit. I'm not going to give up on that podcast. I want to listen to more episodes because I don't listen to enough podcasts in this genre. I don't listen to enough kink, BDSM style podcasts. And I do want to get out there and listen to what other people are saying and see if I can add to that, if I can echo that, if I can support what they're saying, if I can recommend them to you. So before I do that, I do want to listen to their stuff and get a good feel of, do they know what they're talking about? Do I agree with their stance on poly? Do I agree with their take on how this should work? There's should work and then there's how things actually work in the real world. I often try to balance both of those. I have a very strong opinion, because I'm a dominant dude. I have a very strong opinion on how things should work. I also know that in practice, in real life, in the day-to-day grind of existence, we don't always reach that ideal of how things should work. So recognizing that, accepting that, understanding that, yeah, we talk about consent all the time. We talk about having respect for each other all the time. And every week someone reaches out to me and says, I was on a kinky website and I started talking with this person and they immediately started degrading me. And I'm not into degradation. And I asked them to stop. I said, I'm not into that. And they told me that I didn't belong on this website. You know, that is life. That is absolutely true experience of that person. And I've seen it myself. I've had people try to dominate me. Why they would want to do that, I don't know. But they have tried to dominate me in that same fashion, where they reach out to me and they're immediately very hardcore and you will obey me. You will do what I say. And for me, it's kind of the highlight of my week because I think to myself, do you know who I am? What is it about me that makes you think I would enjoy that type of interaction? But I know it's real. Because my partners often date outside of our relationship, which is fine with me, I get to experience secondhand the kind of communication they get from people. And sometimes it's atrocious. It's really bad, especially when it comes to kink, especially when it comes to poly, especially when it comes to non-traditional things. And they always share this stuff with me. And I've talked about this before in the past, about just how ridiculously off-putting and aggressive and degrading people can be when they find out that you're kinky, or they find out that you're poly, or they find out that you are somehow not exactly what they want you to be. All of a sudden they turn from being, yeah, I think you're really hot and I want to talk to you and you're really interesting. And as soon as they find out that you're not exactly who they want you to be, now you're a monster. And you're dirty, and you're sick, and you're twisted, and they don't want to have anything to do with you. Oh, and by the way, you're also ugly, which is always strange because 10 minutes ago you were very attracted to me and were trying to hook up with me. But that's how it goes. So I got a little off topic there, but I'm going to try really hard to make polyamory a bigger focus of what we talk about. And there's a lot I want to talk about. There's a lot to say about the subject, both on the advice side and also just getting people to understand what it's about. So, long and short, I listened to a podcast today that was unintentionally anti-poly, and I want to do what I can to kind of push back against that. Maybe I can talk to these folks. I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I enjoyed your podcast, except I feel like you came across as a very unintentionally anti-poly stance. And I don't think you want that because you at least say that you're totally okay with it. Here's how I think you were unintentionally anti-poly. We'll find out about that soon. They might very well never answer my email, which I don't blame them. We're all very busy. Rolling this back onto topic, hard dom versus soft dom. And I've gotten this question a lot. Sometimes people directly will ask me, you know, I really like your style. You seem like such a soft dominant, and that's really what I'm looking for in a relationship. And personally, I don't think of myself as a soft dom. That's not my primary style. But as I started to examine that and think about it, it's not that I'm a soft dom or a hard dom. I try to be a very versatile dom in that I recognize sometimes the very hard, strict, no compromise, I'm unbending style of domination is very effective with certain kinds of submission. And sometimes the more gentle, I want you to do this, I'm going to talk you through it style of submission is very effective with certain submissives. And in my experience, I found that it's rare that one submissive is really shoved to either end of that spectrum. So what are we talking about when we say hard dom versus soft dom? I think we have a picture in our mind of a dominant dressed in leather, holding a crop, telling their submissive to do something, and there is no negotiation in that discussion. It's you will do this immediately, or I'm going to use this crop and I'm going to make it hurt. And that's fine. At no point am I going to say that either one of these styles are wrong, because they're truly not. There are some dominants that is their style. There's no compromise. There's no discussion. There's no asking questions. There's no hesitation. If you do not do what I say immediately, there's going to be very severe consequences. And that is a style. And there are a lot of submissives that is exactly what they want. They crave that. They do not want their dom to ask them to do something. They want their dom to command them, to compel them, to force them to do something. We talk about brat play a lot. And a lot of what that comes down to is a person that's really into brat play from the submissive side. They kind of feel like if there's not a bit of struggle, if there's not a bit of back and forth, if there's not a bit of being compelled to do something, it's not really exciting. If their dom tells them, I want you to go into the kitchen, empty the dishwasher, you have 5 minutes. There are some submissives that in and of itself is fun and exciting and a challenge, and they want to be pleasing and they want to do a really good job and they just want their dom to be proud of them. And they go running into the kitchen and they do their best to do that task. That's what's fun for them. There are some submissives that when they hear that, it's exciting to them, but they want to push back. They want to say, well, what if I don't do it? They like that play. They like that pushing back against authority. They want to be pleasing. They want to be made to do something. And that's fun for them. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a fun play style for some people, where the dom has to be a bit more aggressive and say, I can't believe you're talking back to me. Don't you remember what happened last time? The sub sticks their tongue out at their dom. There's a little exchange. Maybe there's a paddling. Maybe there's some sort of being compelled to do the thing. And that is a very fun play style for some people. And then there's other submissives that they like being told what to do, but they don't like being told what to do in a soft way. They don't want their dom to say, I want you to go do this. It would make me happy if you went and did this. To them, that's kind of boring. It doesn't really have a crisp edge to it, I guess. And for them, they're not really bratty. They're not going to protest. They're not going to say, what if I don't? They're not going to stick their tongue out. They're not going to play those games. But for them, being asked to do something is mundane and boring. They get asked to do things at work. No one at work tells them, you're going to go into the kitchen and you're going to do this thing or else. That is where they find their excitement. And here's the kicker for all this. I've never met a sub that was entirely one way or the other. And that is part of the art of domination. You have to be flexible enough. I'm not saying that you have to be able to do the full spectrum of domination. You don't have to be someone that can be incredibly soft, somewhere in the middle, and incredibly hard. That's not in everyone's wheelhouse. However, if you only have one style, if you only have one way of doing things, you're going to be very limited in your ability to fulfill the needs of your submissive. That's just a fact. Unless you are lucky enough to happen into a relationship with someone that matches the way you do kink precisely, you're going to have a hard time. Because I've definitely had bratty submissives. I've said before, it's not really my style. And it's true. I would not engage in a relationship with someone that was their real joy, because that's not how I like to play. So I've made that choice in my submission and domination that I will accept a bit of brattiness. I can play that occasionally, but I don't want that to be a staple of our relationship. Most of the time, I personally want a submissive that says, yes, sir, right away, sir, and that takes joy from that task, right? That's what I like. That doesn't mean it's the right way or the best way. It's just what I like. I also like spandex. Some of you don't like spandex. That's how kinks work. So for me, that's what I look for in a sub, someone that really enjoys that task and looks forward to me giving them tasks that they can complete and make me proud, and that makes them feel good. That's how I play. Even in that style, sometimes you need to be able to move the slider. Sometimes they need, you're going to do this right now. or else. And that is the kick they need. That is the thrill they need. That is the initiative they need to really enjoy this task. Versus if I come at it from an approach of, hey, if you don't mind, I would like you to unload the dishwasher for me, and I want you to do a good job. That might not work. That might not be what they need at that moment. And a good dom, a flexible dom, someone that is able to adjust their style, will recognize that. They'll see from their sub's reaction that, yeah, that didn't work. They need a little bit more. They need a little bit of oomph on that command. Or, and very importantly, you come at it really hard, you're going to do this or else, and you see your sub not react well to that. Yesterday they did. Yesterday they thought that was the hottest thing ever. But today when you said that, you saw them kind of fold. You saw them be really resigned. They didn't say no. They didn't say make me. They didn't say I don't wanna. But you could tell. You can see it in their face and their expression that, you know what, this isn't what I want to do right now. This isn't fun right now. For whatever reason. I got some bad news at work today. I'm not really feeling good. I'm kind of in a bad place mentally. You know, what I need right now is not a task that I have to go do. What I'd like right now is some softness from my dom. And if you're incapable of providing that, if you're incapable of saying, hey, you know what? Never mind. I don't want you to do that right now. Right now, why don't you come sit with me on the couch? Why don't we talk about your day? To me, that is really good domination because it's realizing that there's something I wanted. I wanted to do this fun play with my sub. I realized they're not into it right now. And I adapted because, yeah, I can make them do it. I can get the crop out. I can get the hairbrush out. I can grab them by the collar and force them to do this thing. Sometimes that's exactly what your sub wants. I promise. Sometimes it's exactly what a submissive wants. And sometimes it is the absolute wrong thing to do. And you have to be able, as a dominant, to tell the difference. You have to. And again, I'm not saying you have to be an incredibly soft dom and an incredibly hard dom and manage to balance everything in the middle. We are all limited. We all have limitations. On the whole, I consider myself a pretty hard dom. I don't like a lot of give and take in the dom-sub relationship. My word is law. That's what I enjoy, and I try very hard to make sure that the way I approach my submissive with that is meeting their needs. Step one, pick a submissive that enjoys that kind of play, right? It seems simple, but since that's the way I like to play, I would not fit well in a relationship with a submissive that wanted to be bratty or a submissive that really wanted a soft touch all the time. I can do soft, and I frequently do, but it's not my primary style of play. I don't want to ask my subs to do something. I want to tell them to do something. And that's a responsibility and a privilege that I take very seriously. And I make sure that I'm not asking them to do things that make them feel bad. But when I say something, it's said. I have spoken. This will be done. And if it's not done immediately the way I want it to, there's going to be consequences. And I try to align myself with subservients that enjoy that style of play. And for example, I frequently talk about my relationship with Katja because it's a good example of a successful and happy BDSM relationship. Because that is the style she likes. She likes to be told what to do in a very clear, decisive manner. She doesn't like it when I ask her, what would you like to do? That's hard for her. It's hard for her to state something she wants because what she wants most of all is to make me happy. So in my relationship with Katja, she doesn't want me to ask her what she wants. She doesn't want me to ask her opinion on a lot of things. Most of the time, what she's looking for from me as her dominant is leadership, is direction, is I want you to do this, and I want you to do it right now, and I want you to do it in this way. That makes her feel happy and fulfilled because then she doesn't have to think about, what if I do it wrong? What if I do it in a way that's not pleasing? What if I don't do it fast enough? Did he mean for me to do it right now, or am I supposed to do this next week? She likes a lot of clear, hard direction. That works well for her. However, there are absolutely times when what Katja needs is a soft touch, and I do my best to provide that. That is the way you have to move back and forth. Now, let's move this over to the soft side. And I'm speaking a bit out of turn here because it's not really the style I practice, but I have seen dominants that have a very soft style. There's really no threat. There's really no compulsion. It's a very different style of domination. And it's absolutely valid because there are submissives that's what they want. They want more of a caring, almost parental style figure. A lot of DDLG players, a lot of people that are into the age play aspect of kink, but not exclusively. There are definitely people that their relationship is a very soft style of domination, but they don't do DDLG or MMLG or MMLB. There's a lot of acronyms here, but I have to be careful about what I say on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. This will probably get flagged anyway. But big, little play, age play, that kind of thing, there are a lot of people that have a soft style of domination that's not their thing. They don't do that at all. And again, as I was saying earlier in the episode, the way that people play may not be your style, but be very open and accepting of people in this community. We have enough trouble navigating the world without beating each other up because our kinks don't align all the time, or someone does something that you don't like, or they do something that is really abhorrent to you. Great, it's abhorrent to you, but don't crap on their thing. Don't make them feel bad for what makes them happy. There are plenty of people in the world that are happy to crap on you and your thing. Let's be a very welcoming, supportive community. So no matter what style of play people are engaged in, if it is consensual, if everybody in the relationship is having a good time, then be very supporting and accepting of that relationship. Don't badmouth people in our own community. Things are going to get really hard for all of us, I think, in the next few years. And we have to stand together. We absolutely have to stand together. Across the whole kink spectrum, across LGBTQ plus kink, there is a bit of a divide, as I've talked about. I understand that divide more now, but we have a lot more in common than we have separate. And when you see people coming after someone in our broader community, whether that's LGBTQ or trans or poly or whatever doesn't fall into the mainstream, you better stick together. You really have to stick together right now because it's going to be rough. And we have to stand up for each other. If you want people to stand up for you, you've got to stand up for them. And you can say, that's not my kink, but they're kinksters. That's not my style of play, but they're in my community. And I will fight for them. I will speak up for them. I will not be part of the crowd that denigrates them. Be very careful about that. Always, but especially right now. So, as I was saying, that soft style of domination sometimes is very manifest in big little play, where it's a very nurturing and caring style of play. There really isn't a lot of discipline. There really isn't a lot of harsh treatment. There's not a lot of hard commands. It's much more of a role play aspect of I'm in charge, but I'm also super gentle with you. I'm going to treat you like a younger person. I'm going to treat you like someone in my care, not necessarily someone that's under my command and authority. And it can be a beautiful style of play. There's nothing wrong with it. Just because it doesn't fit into the stereotypical black leather, crop, smack, you're going to do what I say, doesn't make it any less valid in what we do. I would say that for the most part, honestly, I think most dom-sub relationships are on that spectrum. I've met very few people that they play hard all the time, that they play soft all the time. It seems to be in the middle, and that's fine. That's kind of how people work. Most of us fall into the middle of the bell graph. Very few of us are pushed out to the extreme edge. If you are, awesome. If you have a partner that's also out there with you, awesome. I'm glad you guys found each other. And you can do super hard. It started hard today and tomorrow it's going to get harder. If that is your thrill and your kink and it makes you happy, go for it. I have no problem with that. I'm towards the hard side myself. If you guys are super soft and it's teddy bears and daisies and everything is happy and that's your style of play, I think that is just as beautiful and just as valid. So there really isn't, in my mind, a right way to do it, except for being flexible enough to work with your partner. I think that is the key in this. Are you able to sometimes not do it the way you want to do it for the sake of your partner? That, to me, is a good relationship. And DOMs especially, we get it in our head that my way or the highway, we're going to do things my way. And there is no discussion on this. I'm not interested in your opinion on what I told you to do. Sometimes that is the right approach, and your sub will be super happy about that. But you need to recognize if you're taking that approach, oh yeah, they're not digging this. This is not working for them. I need to find out why. The answer is not, I will just apply more force. That's not the correct answer in most situations. Soft DOMs, same thing. Sometimes you're in a soft relationship and you ask for things to be done. Sometimes you need to crank it up a little bit. Sometimes you need to be able to say, hey, you know what? Or else. Or else there's going to be a spanking. Or else there's going to be a consequence. Sometimes that's what your sub needs. So I've been talking a lot to DOMs in this. Believe it or not, I do have DOM listeners. There are few and far between. This is primarily a sub-sponsored show, and that's fine. DOMs being who we are, we don't tend to go to other people for advice. So while I've had a number of DOMs reach out to me directly, and I really appreciate that interaction, I know from the amount of correspondence I get, most of you are subs, and that's fine. Sometimes this is a peek behind the scenes for the submissive, and sometimes this can be a conversation starter with you and your DOM. I know that sometimes it can be hard for you to approach your DOM with a problem and say, I'm not happy with the way things are going, and I want to go this direction, or I'm not getting this need met. Would you listen to this with me? Or could you listen to this podcast on this episode? This really spoke to me and what I'm going through. And I'm happy to be a bridge that way. I'm not telling other DOMs, this is how you do a relationship. I know I frequently sound like that. I do have a lot of respect for the fact that my way is my way. It's not the only way. But I do also think that there are broad guidelines that can be really useful and helpful across the spectrum. Being flexible in your approach to your submissive is one of those things. I think that more often than not, if you are completely rigid and you only know how to do things one way, you will be less successful than a DOM that is flexible enough to say, I'm a pretty hard DOM. I like the crop. I like to be obeyed instantly. But in this situation, I can see that's not working. I'm not having success with this submissive on this day, in this session. Maybe I should change my approach. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be a soft DOM forever. And if you're a soft DOM, that doesn't mean that you're going to have a crop in your hand for the rest of your life. It means that you need to be flexible enough to meet the needs of your sub. And in my opinion, that is a DOM's first responsibility. Always. DOMs meet the needs of your sub. It's the weird sort of paradoxical service. DOMs and subs serve each other, as odd as that sounds. Often when we look at these relationships, it seems like a very I say, you do. And that is how a lot of dominant and submissive relationships are. But what is the DOM doing there? By giving the sub an opportunity to serve, by giving them direction, by giving them guidance, by giving them support, and all those other aspects, they are serving the needs of their sub. And that is not something to be ashamed of. For me, it's the thing I am most proud of. When I am meeting the needs of my sub, I am serving them. I'm serving them my way on my terms. That's the key. I'm doing it my way. I'm doing the thing that makes me happy. So, even if you're the hardest DOM in the world and you've never given an inch and you have a crop in your hand 24/7, believe it or not, you are serving the needs of the submissives you're working with. And that's cool. That really is cool. Don't feel like submission and service are the same thing. They're different. They really are different. You can be serving the needs of your sub. It doesn't make you a submissive dominant. Maybe you are. Maybe you're switchy. Also cool. But a lot of times doms are very queasy about the word serve and submission and all that. They're doms. They don't want to be seen as submissive. They don't want to be seen as servile. I think that's a weakness. I think that's a bit of insecurity because you need to recognize as a dom what you're doing. Are you serving the needs of your sub? If you want them to be happy and you want them to stay with you and you want them to be a good submissive, you may want to consider that. So I think I covered that pretty well. I can definitely go into more detail if I didn't really get into the nuts and bolts of hard domination and soft domination. Hard domination, you do what I say when I say it. We're not talking about this. And if you don't jump immediately, there's going to be a consequence. It's not always physical. It might be some other kind of consequence. And on this really far end of that spectrum, on the really soft side, it's, hey, I need you to do something. I'm going to walk you through it. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to take it really slow and easy. I'm going to support you. I'm going to make this very fun and easy for you. And they're both valid. They're both valid. They're very different, but they're both valid. And the best doms, I think, can range across that spectrum. All right, folks. We'll see in the edit if I made any sense. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I think I've really made a point and I get to editing and I think, wow, you were really off base, my man. I think this time I made it. If you would like to become a patron of the show, I would appreciate that very much. Go to wickedfellow.com. There is a link to our Patreon there. It's difficult to find my site by going to Patreon directly because, as I've often said, Patreon is happy to take my money and your money, but they don't like to support adult-style creators. They started as a music sharing site, and I get that. And a lot of us have kind of glommed on to that bandwagon, but they don't really like their adult creators. They kind of ghettoize us, and it's hard to find us. So if you do like Wicked Fellow Patreon, I don't think it comes up. Maybe I'm wrong. But there's a direct link on my website. The YouTube site is there, and there are links to all of our spicy sites, which aren't what they used to be, but I'm trying to work on that. As always, folks, consent is king. Take very good care of each other, and I'll see you next week.